The scout flotilla entered the Sol system with the quiet confidence of predators cataloging prey. Their vessels were ancient by human standards yet flawless in function, hulls layered with alloys refined across 1,000 conquered stars. Sensors bloomed outward, drinking in data, converting an entire civilization into neat columns of probability. The numbers amused them. One by one, the reports assembled themselves. Planetary count, acceptable. Industrial output, scattered, inefficient. Energy signatures, inconsistent and wasteful. Orbital traffic, chaotic, uncoordinated. Military presence, laughably thin. The species called itself human, divided into rival governments that barely tolerated one another, let alone unified for war. A civilization still arguing over borders had no place on a galactic map dominated by empires. The scouts lingered at the edge of the system, comfortably beyond the detection threshold of local sensors. They had done this countless times before. Every young species followed patterns. Early satellites, crude fusion plants, defensive platforms clustered protectively around their homeworld like frightened animals. Humans were no different. If anything, they were sloppier. One scout officer flagged the weapon analysis with visible amusement. The majority of human armaments relied on kinetics. Mass drivers, rail systems, missiles, chemical explosives. Primitive tools for species that hadn't yet learned that energy was king. No evidence of singularity weapons. No reality warping fields. No star-breaking arrays. Just metal thrown at high speed and the hopeful belief that velocity could replace sophistication. The flotilla's commander authorized a deeper scan, expecting confirmation, and received something stranger instead. Several readings refused to settle. Ghost signatures appeared and vanished along the system's outer dark. Power echoes flickered at impossible angles, then smoothed themselves into background noise. The software blamed solar interference. The commander accepted the answer without concern. Young systems were messy. Stars were noisy. Fear often produced imagined threats. They laughed openly when the comparative models finished running. Human fleet capacity, extrapolated generously, ranked below even the coalition's auxiliary defense forces. Population density suggested potential labor value, nothing more. Cultural data scraped from intercepted transmissions revealed obsession with internal conflict, entertainment, and history they romanticized but no longer understood. They told stories of wars and victories as if remembering strength could substitute for possessing it. A provisional classification was issued. Non-hostile. Non-threatening. Delayed assimilation candidate. The scouts transmitted their findings back toward coalition space, embedding commentary that bordered on mockery. The commander noted that humans still broadcast openly across their electromagnetic spectrum, advertising their thoughts to anyone patient enough to listen. A species that spoke so loudly could never strike quietly. That was rule one of survival beyond a single star. As the report finalized, one junior analyst hesitated. There was a single anomaly remaining. A vessel, briefly detected near the heliopause, too small to match any known coalition design, too controlled to be debris. It had appeared without an identifiable energy spike and vanished without acceleration trails. The analyst suggested a probe. The commander dismissed it. The system was cluttered with relics, human experiments, forgotten machines flung outward by curiosity rather than purpose. If the humans possessed stealth technology worth fearing, it would have left fingerprints somewhere else in the data. It had not. The anomaly was logged and deprioritized. With assessments complete, the flotilla adjusted position and prepared to withdraw. There was no need to linger. The coalition would send a token force later, a reminder to this young species of its place in the cosmic order. A demonstration, nothing more. Enough to break resistance before it ever formed. As the scouts turned away, Earth rotated silently below, blue and unremarkable against the void. No alarms rang. No fleets surged to meet them. Humanity did nothing at all. To the scouts, that silence confirmed everything. Fear. Confusion. Weakness. They never considered another possibility. That humans, when they chose not to speak, were already listening. The Coalition's test force arrived without ceremony, a compact formation of warships designed less for battle and more for intimidation. They crossed into human-controlled space, broadcasting their presence deliberately, flooding local sensors with unmistakable signatures. The message was simple: "You have been noticed." The response was simpler still. Nothing happened. Human satellites continued their blind rotations until the first alien pulse washed over them. Systems failed cleanly, shut down by targeted bursts that left hardware intact but useless. Relays went dark. Navigation beacons fell silent. In orbit around distant colonies, stations lost power and drifted helplessly, their crews spared only because the Coalition saw no value in wasting ammunition on civilians who posed no threat. The alien commander watched the effects with detached satisfaction. This was the moment most species panicked. Emergency signals. Disorganized launches. Desperate shows of force meant to project courage they did not possess. Humans offered none of it. Their networks fractured quietly, piece by piece, like a body accepting anesthesia. A transmission was prepared and sent toward Earth, translated into every major human language. It announced the Coalition's authority, its history, and the inevitable outcome of resistance. Compliance would preserve lives. Defiance would erase them. The words were polished, rehearsed across centuries of conquest. Still, no answer came back. The silence began to irritate the officers. Data feeds showed confusion spreading through human infrastructure. Power grids compensating. Military channels activating, then going quiet again. Small patrol craft launched from planetary docks only to retreat moments later, as if recalled by unseen hands. To the Coalition, it looked like indecision bordering on collapse. Laughter returned to the command deck. The scouts' report had been generous. Humans were not merely weak, they were timid. A species so fractured that even an existential threat could not unify them quickly enough to matter. The test force advanced deeper, destroying a handful of automated defense platforms that responded too slowly to evade fire. The platforms used kinetic rounds, exactly as predicted. The alien shields absorbed the impacts effortlessly, dispersing the energy in harmless ripples. Sensor logs recorded the encounters for instructional archives. Future cadets would study this system as an example of technological stagnation. As the fleet closed the distance toward Earth, something strange emerged in the data. Communications between human military nodes spiked briefly, then ceased altogether. Not jammed. Not destroyed. Simply shut off. The commander assumed panic protocols had failed. Human command structures were clearly unsuited for coordinated defense. The order was given to form up and prepare a visible approach to the homeworld. The goal was fear, not annihilation. Once the planet understood how thoroughly it was outmatched, surrender would follow. It always did. From the fleet, Earth appeared serene. Clouds curled over oceans. City lights glittered on the dark side like nothing had changed. No planetary shields rose to greet them. No fleets emerged from hidden docks. The Coalition's warships slowed, savoring the moment. Then a junior sensor officer spoke, uncertain. There was an object ahead. Small. Isolated. It had not been there moments before, yet it registered cleanly now, sitting directly along the fleet's projected path. No escort. No formation. No obvious weapon systems charging. The commander studied the projection and dismissed it as a late response. A token ship sent to die for morale. Typical of frightened species, clinging to symbolism when strategy failed. The alien fleet maintained course. Behind the calm of Earth's orbit, humanity remained silent. And in that silence, the test had already ended. The object resolved into a single Terran vessel, drifting with deliberate stillness between the Coalition fleet and Earth. Its profile was unimpressive, angular rather than elegant, built for function without ornament. It carried no visible insignia, no glowing shield envelope, no surge of power that suggested weapons charging. To the Coalition commanders watching from their bridges, it looked unfinished, almost civilian. Sensor sweeps returned contradictory data. The ship's mass registered higher than its volume allowed. Thermal output was negligible. Emissions were tightly controlled, so clean they seemed artificial. The algorithm struggled, recalculated, and settled on an error margin the officers found amusing. Human manufacturing was sloppy, imperfect readings were expected. A transmission followed, narrow band and precisely aimed. No bravado. No declarations of glory or defiance. The Terran ship identified itself by designation alone and issued a single statement, calm and unadorned, informing the coalition fleet that further advance would result in consequences. There was no countdown, no threat embedded between the words. Just information. The bridge erupted in open mockery. A lone ship standing against a force that had ended civilizations. The commander allowed the laughter to run its course before giving the obvious order. Eliminate the vessel. Make the lesson clear. Weapons cycled. Energy lances converged on the Terran craft, releasing a coordinated strike calculated to overwhelm any conceivable defense. The beams struck true. Nothing happened. No explosion. No fragmentation. The Terran ship remained exactly where it was, untouched, as if the attack had passed through empty space. Confusion rippled through the fleet. Secondary scans confirmed the ship still existed, its structure unchanged, its power signature steady and low. The commander ordered a second volley, heavier this time, overlapping frequencies designed to shred shielding through sheer saturation. Again, the strikes landed. Again, they failed to produce results. Before the fleet could adjust tactics, the Terran ship moved. There was no visible acceleration. No flare of engines. One moment it was stationary, the next it occupied a slightly different position, closer, aligned with the coalition flagship. Sensors lagged behind the motion, struggling to reconstruct the transition after it had already occurred. A single weapon fired. It was not an energy discharge. No beam cut through space. No radiation spike preceded it. The only indication was a sudden, impossible reading as a dense object appeared inside the flagship's defensive envelope at a fraction of light speed. The impact did not explode. It compressed. Armor layers designed to withstand stellar forces folded inward. Internal compartments vanished in a cascading collapse as mass and velocity combined with surgical precision. The flagship's core ceased to exist before its alarms could finish activating. Power died. Command vanished. The ship remained whole for a heartbeat, then sagged, broken from the inside out. Across the coalition fleet, panic replaced amusement. Formation coherence shattered as ships maneuvered unpredictably, trying to escape targeting solutions they could not detect. Weapons locked and unlocked without firing. Shield systems spiked, then failed, overwhelmed by physics they had never needed to counter. The Terran vessel advanced again, unhurried. Each shot followed the same pattern. One strike. One kill. No wasted motion. No excess destruction. Coalition ships vanished from tactical displays with mechanical regularity, their defenses meaningless against an enemy that did not fight the way war had always been fought. Data officers screamed warnings the commanders barely understood. The Terran weapon was not piercing shields, it was bypassing them. Predictive models showed the projectiles were being launched from points the coalition sensors never saw, trajectories calculated long before the fleet altered course. Every evasive maneuver had already been accounted for. A realization spread through the surviving bridges, cold and suffocating. Humanity had never intended to meet force with force. They had built weapons that ignored doctrine entirely. Weapons that treated fleets not as opponents, but as solved equations. As the Terran ship closed the distance, a final transmission reached the fleet. The same calm voice spoke again, unchanged by the destruction it had caused. You were warned. For the first time since entering the Sol system, the Coalition understood the silence they had mistaken for fear. It had been restraint. What followed was not chaos, but method. Additional Terran vessels emerged from the dark in controlled intervals, not in overwhelming numbers, but enough to make the pattern unmistakable. They appeared without fanfare, slipping into positions that cut off retreat vectors with mathematical certainty. No flares. No declarations. Just presence. Coalition systems began failing in sequence. Not randomly, not violently. Navigation grids desynchronized first, star maps drifting out of alignment by fractions that compounded into impossibility. Weapons lost target locks seconds after acquiring them. Communication arrays filled with clean static, not noise, but absence, as if the signals themselves had been erased mid-thought. Crews tried manual overrides and found nothing wrong with the hardware. The problem was not damage. It was denial. Terran ships did not fire indiscriminately. They struck command vessels, logistics carriers, coordination nodes. Each impact severed a limb rather than crushing the body. Coalition escorts found themselves intact but useless, floating with full magazines and no orders to follow. Panic spread unevenly, ship to ship, as captains realized they could still fight but no longer understood how. The Terrans transmitted again, this time on an open channel the Coalition could not block. The message was brief. Hostilities would cease once all offensive systems powered down. Withdrawal corridors would be provided. Any ship that fired would be removed from the equation. Some commanders obeyed immediately. Others, driven by pride or terror, attempted retaliation. Those ships vanished with the same cold efficiency shown before, eliminated so cleanly that nearby vessels registered the loss only as a gap in formation. The lesson required no repetition. As the engagement unfolded, Coalition analysts reached a grim conclusion. Humanity had studied them. Not casually, not recently. Their responses anticipated doctrine refined over millennia. Terran targeting favored ships with specific command architectures unique to Coalition fleets. Their interference patterns exploited redundancies the Coalition believed were strengths. This was not improvisation. It was preparation. Humanity's approach to war became painfully clear. They did not escalate gradually. They did not posture. They did not seek glory. They waited, absorbed intent, then acted with decisive finality. Conflict, to them, was a problem to be ended, not a state to be maintained. Within minutes, resistance collapsed. Ships powered down one by one, drifting in compliant silence. Medical bays overflowed, not from catastrophic hull breaches, but from crews injured by sudden deceleration and internal system failures. The Terrans did not exploit the vulnerability. No boarding actions followed. No demands were made beyond withdrawal. Corridors opened through Terran-controlled space, precise and narrow. Coalition ships that followed them were left untouched. Those that deviated were gently corrected once, firmly the second time. None required a third. As the last hostile vessel limped away from Earth's orbit, the Terran fleet held position. They did not pursue. They did not broadcast victory. To outside observers, it would appear as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, just another quiet rearrangement of forces in the endless dark. One final transmission reached the retreating fleet, recorded automatically into every surviving log. It was not a threat, nor a warning. It was an explanation. Humanity did not expand recklessly because it did not need to. It did not display power because it understood the cost of being feared. But it would not allow its home to become a lesson written in blood. The Sol system was not unguarded. It was simply patient. As the Coalition ships fled toward the stars they once ruled without challenge, a single truth settled over their crews. They had not encountered a weak species that lashed out in desperation. They had encountered one that had chosen restraint, and only just set it aside. The revised report was transmitted in silence, stripped of humor, commentary, and every trace of confidence that had colored the first assessment. Where mockery once lived, precision now ruled. Human classification was amended across Coalition databases, cascading into Allied networks within hours. Threat index elevated beyond all prior projections. Engagement protocols rewritten from the ground up. The scouts who authored the original analysis did not defend themselves. There was nothing to say. The data spoke clearly now, unforgiving in its clarity. Humanity had not been overlooked because it was weak, but because it had chosen to be unseen. Every assumption the Coalition had relied upon had been inverted, and the cost of that arrogance still drifted in Sol's orbit, silent and broken. Across the wider galaxy, reaction was immediate. Expansion fleets altered courses mid-transit. Border worlds once earmarked for assimilation were quietly removed from strategic timetables. Diplomatic corps scrambled to assemble cultural briefings on a species they had dismissed as irrelevant days earlier. No one laughed anymore. What unsettled them most was not the efficiency of the Terran response, but its restraint. The coalition fleet had been neutralized without extermination. Escape had been permitted. Wounded crews had been allowed to live. In a galaxy where power was proven through annihilation, humanity had demonstrated something far more disturbing: control. Within human space, there were no public celebrations. No triumphant broadcasts. Civilian networks restored themselves gradually, systems coming back online as if waking from a controlled sleep. To most of the population, the incursion registered only as a brief outage, an unexplained interruption that resolved itself without explanation. Governments issued no statements. Militaries returned to readiness states no different than before. On a secure channel far from public record, a single Terran commander completed an after-action log. The entry was concise. Objectives met. Homeworld secured. Escalation avoided. No medals were requested. No commendations recommended. The event was treated as maintenance rather than war. That log would later be studied across alien academies in fragments and translations, parsed endlessly for meaning. What scholars failed to grasp was its simplicity. Humanity did not define itself by conquest. It did not measure worth through territory or tribute. Its violence, when unleashed, served only one function: to ensure it would not be needed again. In the months that followed, envoys arrived at the edge of Sol space bearing gifts, treaties, and carefully worded apologies. They were received politely and kept at a distance. Humanity listened, evaluated, and responded without haste. Trust, they made clear, would not be extended quickly to those who had come uninvited with weapons charged. The story spread regardless. Among traders and soldiers, smugglers and scholars, a new understanding took root. Humans were not loud. They did not posture. They did not rush to prove themselves. But when tested, they ended the test. The coalition never returned to Sol with hostile intent. No fleet crossed that boundary again without invitation. Maps were redrawn, not because humanity demanded it, but because everyone else agreed it was wiser. Somewhere deep in archived coalition records, the original scout report still existed, preserved as a warning. It ended with a line that future officers were required to memorize before earning command. Never mistake silence for weakness. Some species are quiet because they are waiting. And when humanity waited, it was never for permission.